Hello, everyone. Chrissy Lewis and I have often been asked why we wrote the Sunrise Readers and how it all came about. And so I thought I would produce this short video clip and chat to you and tell you how that happened. And thank you for being interested, by the way. 1984, 1985 in Zimbabwe, in Gweru, Zimbabwe, shortly after independence. So those of you who were adults or young then will remember the times. And I was working at Midlands Christian School in Gweru. One of the parents at the school was a bookseller, and she came to me one day and said, Viv, I don't know what you're going to do about books for grade 1 and 2 next year, because only a certain amount of foreign exchange has been allocated towards textbooks for the Ministry of Education. And obviously, that money has to be spent on high school textbooks so that the children can pass their O and A levels and their end exams. So she said there are going to be no reading books available. And this dilemma was very interesting for me because as a child, I'd always wanted to write for children, and I'd turned out screeds of stories on my mum's manual typewriter, clicking away, and but this, writing reading books, it's very technical. I know that those of you who are in education will understand that the teaching of reading is very systematic, and it's sort of brick upon brick, and it's very, very scientific almost. So it's not just a matter of creativity and ideas. It's a matter of knowing exactly when to introduce which vocab and how often to repeat it and all that sort of thing. So I went to the infants department, that's the grade ones, and collected the books that were available. And if you remember, in the low density urban schools, English speaking, English medium schools, the reading books were Janet and John, Kathy and Mark, the Happy Trio, Ladybird books, things like that. So I collected all of the books that were available, and I went to a friend of mine who's a really excellent grade 1 and 2 teacher and also an artist, a gifted artist. And I said to her, won't you consider writing reading books, because we're going to need them. And she kept the books and had a look at it for a little while, and then she got back to me and said, no, I've got young children and this is not what I can do at this time. So then, I had the ideas, but I didn't have the technical skills. I was junior school trained, not infants. And so I went to Chrissy Lewis, who was the grade 1 teacher at Midlands Christian School at the time, and I said to Chrissy, wouldn't you have a go at writing these books? We're going to have a problem. So I said, I'll do it with you. So basically that's how it started. So it was the days before computers, so we got exercise books and pencils, and we did a very thorough review of the reading books that were available, our background in learning the teaching of reading, and we started writing. Now, we didn't have any idea of finding a publisher or anything like that. We were going to print them on the school Gestetner, maybe get the children to draw pictures or draw pictures ourselves. We hadn't thought the whole thing through. And we just intended to meet the needs of our own school. So what happened next was we were working at my home, and I was busy on all of this. I was teaching and working on the books. And if some of you may remember this wonderful man, Peter Griffiths, he had a huge impact on education in Zimbabwe. He was an Elam missionary and a really great educator himself, responsible for so many schools in the country, mission schools. And he was the head, I think, I might be slightly wrong, of the curriculum development unit, at least definitely for RE, in Zimbabwe in the Ministry of Education. And now he was coming around to the different schools, and he came and stayed with us. And so he saw what we were doing. And he said, you know what, you should submit this project to LONGMAN Zimbabwe and see whether they wouldn't be interested in publishing these reading books for you. Now, we were delighted because anyone who would have remembered the old reading books that were being used, they were very culturally not relevant to our children. They were from Britain or America, very good reading books for the time, but culturally not relevant. So we had been so excited about bringing races together and using stories that our children would identify with in Zimbabwe. And so we did. We sent a summary of the project to, it was David Mackenzie at the time, MD of LONGMAN Zimbabwe, and we sent it there, and he indicated that they would be interested. So that's how the journey began. And so we wrote the Sunrise Readers, we submitted them to the Ministry of Education. LONGMAN Zimbabwe would not have published them if the ministry had not approved them for the schools. It's marketing is, every publishing house has to depend on marketing. So to get the Ministry of Education's approval was essential to ensure the market, because schools wouldn't buy books that weren't approved by the Ministry of Education. So the process, it was really hard. I think that there were many times that Chrissy and I would not have started the project if we had known all the challenges that we would have faced. Because things that meant a lot to us when we submitted the books to the Ministry of Education. So for those of you interested in the whole writing process, first of all, obviously LONGMAN's editors would work through our material and get their experts to assess it, and there would be changes and whatever made. And then when it went to the Ministry of Education for approval, there were many things that we had to remove from the books to get that approval that meant a lot to us. So we definitely wanted good values, character building values in our stories, and with our Christian faith background, we also wanted to include Christian stories, just a few, in the book. So there were tough times, and it was hard work, but we got Ministry of Education approval. In fact, I've got some of the first books here, and so you'll recognize the first 5. And as you may be able to see, you may not, but it says approved by the Ministry of Education. That's really essential for sales. So these were the first books, and LONGMAN Zimbabwe, what happens when you write is you get paid royalties, and you get a contract from the publishing house, and so royalties are like 10%. It depends on your contract, but Chrissy and I would get 5% each, because we shared the work. And then they have the say. The publishing house does have the say in which artists are used, and you hand over your work, your intellectual property, as it were, to the publisher. And so we had different artists. It was a rush project, but so we had different artists doing the different books. So there were disappointments in that the characters looked very different as they went through the stories. And yeah, we had to get our heads around quite a few different things in the process. We never ever imagined when we started this project that that eventually these books would be being used to teach reading in all the schools in Zimbabwe. We never had an inkling of how far this project would go, and the humbling thing in more recent years has been when people have discovered that we wrote the books, that they've been, oh, you're the authors of the Sunrise Readers. We never realized that we would have the honor and the privilege of touching the lives of so many children all over our beautiful Zimbabwe. And so it's been really, really humbling and inspiring. And I remember one teacher said, "Oh, you must have made a lot of money out of these books." And the thing is, if we know our history of Zim, we do know that so many, maybe the agent said maybe 50% of the sales are going with illegal photocopies with street vendors. And we wish that wouldn't happen, but it does. And the other thing is that there have been many years in our beautiful country's history when, of course, with inflation, by the time royalties get paid out once a year, 5 months into the next year, there was nothing. But the royalties have been a blessing to us as a family, definitely when we were really struggling. Just being able to go on holiday, pay off our mortgage, things like that. So they have been a blessing. And so many years later, to be asked by Pearson, who's taken over the publishing work of Longman, to revise the books, we have really loved doing it. And we have just beautiful art. The artwork is beautiful. The characters are the same right from the beginning, so that children will love them. And where's the first one? There they are. Those of you who know Tatenda and David and Chipo and Jenny, it's been such a thrill to rewrite them now. And the first 5 are available currently. Books 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 are in the process. 6 and 7, all the artwork's finished there with the printers. What is the date today? 22nd of April 2020, if you're watching this. Book 8, the artwork is finished, and the text, etc., is being checked, and they're starting on book 9. So anyway, that's a little bit of a history. As I said, thank you for being interested, and we're just trusting that the new Sunrise readers are going to bring as much delight and an enjoyment to learning to read for our precious children. So very best wishes to you all, and God bless.